Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim, and we talk about horror movies on this show. And in this episode, we are delving into the fifth film in the Conjuring cinematic universe. It is The Nun. I mean, how do we feel so far? We're two for two, right? Like Annabelle 2 was
Uh,
better, but it wasn't good.
I liked it more than you. So for me, it would be 3 out of
Okay,
4.
all right. Um, I like the both Conjuring movies. The second one in particular, I think, is great. Um, and then Annabelle's terrible. Annabelle Creation is a lot better, but still kind of not past like mediocre for me. But
Um, I wouldn't say it's like I wouldn't put it on the same level as the first two Conjuring movies, but for me, it's like a definite it's not like a it would be like above mediocre, but I guess maybe below love. So kind of in the middle there. But
above
I would vouch
mediocre.
for it though.
I would hope you've got a few things between mediocre and love, Tim.
Oh sure,
like
yeah.
really good, great love.
Yeah.
You got a few things in
I
there.
would say pretty good for me.
That's bold. Where does the boy land on this scale?
Oh, I don't even know if you can measure that.
Oh, Timmy. So, so first of all, obviously this is a different, another spin-off, right? We've had the Annabelle and the prequel to that, and now we've got the Nun, and I didn't know what my expectations were going into this because I felt like, well, it could be good, it could be bad. I don't know. Like Annabelle sucked, so I'm hoping the Nun's better. I think there's more potential with the character.
Well, I would say for me, my expectations were pretty high. Mostly because, yeah, again, I like most of the Conjuring movies, but also, and I think this is again something we disagreed about a little bit, but the director Corin Hardy's
Mm.
first movie, The Hallow, I actually liked a lot. So for me, I was like, all right, Conjuring universe, the Nun looks cool, and then Corin Hardy, like everything was like, oh, this is probably going to be a slam dunk for me. So
For
yeah, I
me,
had pretty high expectations.
yeah, I don't know how you say her name. Teza Farmiga, I think. I'll go with, but she's the younger sister of Vera Farmiga, who's of course one of the main characters in the Conjuring movies. So clearly, our little sister got some work out of this. I like her a lot. I liked her in the Final Girls. I've liked her in other stuff she's popped up in. So that was
American
cool.
Horror Story.
I didn't like that show, so I quit after like an episode. But but I'll take your word for it. Um, but yeah,
At least she's good at it.
yeah, she's kind of becoming one of the modern screen. I feel like her, Emma Roberts, who's also an American Horror Story, funnily enough, and what's the name? Lulu Wilson, I think her name is. That's the kid in Annabelle 2 and Ouija 2, who
Oh, okay.
who's becoming the mini Scream Queen, if you will. Uh, but
That's fine.
but I like Formiga, so I was like, okay, right, I like her. Potential here. We'll see how it goes. So as always, we'll start spoiler free. We'll get into spoilers somewhere in the middle, and we'll warn you before we do. So, none pretty simple in terms of premise. It's set in Romania at an abbey. That's this convent which is there to keep the evil at bay. Like the hole in which the nun will come into the world. They're there to constantly pray and stop it. And then at the start of the film, one of them commits suicide, and this prompts the Vatican to send in their their priest investigator. What was the phrase they used? It was like a
Miracle something,
miracle
or
man
like
or something like that, or miracle finder or something. Yeah,
there's
yeah,
or there's some weird thing was like or maybe that was just something he said where he investigates miracles or something.
yeah, maybe. But he goes in, but they say, "Hey, you're going to take this girl with you. She has experience in the area," and he assumes that means she knows the land. She's been in Romania. She's not. Obviously, it's going to be end up in something else. But that's Formiga's character, Sister Irene, and she is not taking her final vows yet, but she's becoming a nun. But she's confused as to why she's been taken to this mission, why they've recommended her. But they go off to Romania, and this guy named Frenchie, who found the dead body and knows the area, takes them into, and he's their guide into the abbey. And then, of course, creepy stuff happens, and that's basically all the plot you can say. That is without spoilers, that's the movie. So I'll ask the question, and I've been really curious, Tim, because you have been very coy over the weekend as to what your feelings were on The Nun. So, with great reservation, I asked a simple question. Tim, did you enjoy The Nun?
Sometimes, after you see a movie, like your instinct is to instantly go to Twitter and be like, "Oh my God, this sucked or this ruled." But then sometimes like, maybe I should save it for the podcast. See, give Pete some time to sweat. Um, yeah, I think I didn't hate it, but it's really not that good of a movie. Like I feel like I think it's a huge mess. And but I feel like it's a mess with like a lot of things that I like. Like there's like definitely like scenes and images and like like some mood stuff at points that I thought was pretty good, but man, it's like everything is just mishmashed together like in this kind of pot that I feel like ultimately doesn't work. Like there's one scene where someone is kind of giving like exposition about like the history of the cathedral they're in, and it is like so like there's so much in that, and it's like 2 minutes, and I'm like, oh my God, like you're really just gonna like blow past that? Like that is like an insane
Oh,
story
don't
beat that
worry.
you just dropped, and like
Don't worry. When we get to spoilers, we're going into that. We're diving into
yeah.
that section of the film.
So so there's a lot of stuff like that where I'm like, okay, I think this story is cool, and oh, this idea was cool, but it feels rushed or glanced over, or it's like all of a sudden they're onto this other thing that yeah, it I hate to say it because again, I really wanted to like it, and it's like like I think it looks cool. Like I like a lot of like the sets and stuff. Like I like castles and gothic stuff. So there was a lot of like imagery that was cool, but it's ultimately yeah, it's not that great.
I'm relieved, Tim, because the way you were being withholding over the weekend was making me worry that this was going to be 2018's The Boy. I was really worried about it because this movie was garbage, and I was optimistic for as long as I could be. If I'm going to if I'm going to be positive about anything, it's probably what I was expecting to like, and that's for Miga. I think her introduction, like her stuff in the first like act of the movie, she's very likable, she's very charismatic, and she kind of makes you draw you in a little bit just to care about her. But
Yeah.
once the creepy stuff starts happening and it goes down its plot, all that just gets left behind, and it's just the plot
Yeah.
and what's happening. So it just all goes away. The moment though where I just completely lost hope, because I was really not feeling it for the first like chunk, especially whenever there was like a scare. One of my big things
A
is
lot of cliche jump scares.
cliche jump scares, but I think the worst thing for me was that there was a lot of moments where I could see the potential. Like I feel like the most effective thing about the Nun in the Conjuring 2 was when she was just off in the distance and staring quietly, right? Now, admittedly, the Conjuring 1 and 2 have a lot of jump scares and loud moments, but James Wan's very good at using those. He's very good at having that and not feeling cheap about it. Like, just that's the part of the ride you're along for, as opposed to being there instead of like, oh, I don't know how to actually make this scary. I'm just going to put a loud noise on it. Here, there's like so many moments where there's one moment when they first come to the cathedral, or soon after, where she kind of appears in a window, like up in the background, right? And I thought that is a fantastic idea. That it could be a great little quiet moment where you just notice her in the corner of your eye in the background. Not only do you get a loud noise as soon as it happens, the camera instantly cuts to shore, like up close or round or over her shoulder. It points to her with like a giant neon light, and it's just like you sucked all of the possible suspense out of this moment. Like it was just gone. But the moment where I just completely lost all hope was when they first spend the night there, and like the big stuff happens during the night because the scary stuff's going to happen. It's a horror movie. As soon as we got to that and how ridiculous and over the top it was, and just how random it was, I was like, okay, this is garbage. Like I've lost all hope for the rest of this now. And sure enough, it just got worse with the backstory exposition scene in the middle, which had a lot of CGI for a horror movie, and then everything that went down the end, just ridiculous ideas. The last act felt more like an action movie.
Oh yeah. And I mean the whole the whole character of Frenchie feels really misplaced in this movie. Like he feels kind of like an act like like a almost like they're trying to get an Ash character or something where he's kind of badass and has like some quippy lines and jokes that he's making towards the end, and I mean,
Hmm.
I think that's a cool character, and a different movie could have been cool, but it felt kind of out of place for this.
Yeah, I never quite made the Ash connection. Um,
I mean, maybe Ash would be going like a little too far, but he's definitely, making jokes and stuff more than,
yeah,
kind of used to in like the,
I think
Conjuring universe kind of thing.
he's supposed to be charming. I don't know if I necessarily found him charming. I guess is
I mean,
how
he's
I'd
an
put it.
interesting enough character at first, but yeah.
Yeah, well, he's okay. He kind of has this problem though, where he leaves the movie for a bit, and it's just kind of obvious how he's going to come back into it. There's no, the movie's very predictable. As much as it does a lot of weird, random choices, the actual main beats and where it's going ultimately are very easy to plot out quite early on. You're like, oh, is this going to happen? Then that's going to happen, and blah 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 blah.
Uh,
Boom. Oh, ties it to the Conjuring. Bye. Like
yeah.
that. There you go. That's the
Yeah.
movie in a nutshell.
Oh, one thing that kind of bothered me is none of the characters. I mean, and the characters are fine, but none of them felt like they were really acting appropriate, like for a horror movie. Like so much weird, creepy stuff is happening, and at at no point does anyone really acknowledge that, like, oh hey, I think we're talking to a ghost right now, or oh hey, really weird stuff is happening. I think we should stay here and follow these people. Like it seems way too like easy for these people to just like go along with like the stuff that's happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments where it's like, this is clearly not what it seems. Why are you just taking this at face value? And
Yeah,
there's a couple of reveals here or there where, as soon as something appeared for the first time, I went, well, I know what this is, or I know what this is going to turn out to be. And sure enough, that happened, but it didn't. It took another half hour. It was like, no, we'll come
yeah,
back to this later for you.
and
We
and it's all right
pretend
to
that this
have
is. There you go.
yeah, and it's fine to have like some of that stuff, but you never really get characters' reactions to it, and like and obviously the main characters are people of faith and stuff. So I guess you could say like, oh well, for them, they believe in this stuff, but it's still not a normal thing that people see every day. Like they should still have feelings about it, be freaked out about it, like want to talk about it and stuff. It just felt like they were like way too willing to go along for the ride, especially considering the fact that they are only two people. Like they're not like calling in reinforcements or something.
Yeah. I also think the structure's kind of a mess. It doesn't really feel like it builds that well. Like I kind of at one point I checked the time and I was like, wait, I've only got like 20 minutes of this left. I don't feel that we've built towards the conclusion yet. And then I think my biggest problem is the direction and the editing. I think the plot is terrible and completely haphazard,
See,
but I feel like you could make it into still a pretty entertaining horror movie just with better direction. Like if you actually filmed the scares properly, if you properly filmed the scares, and but it felt so jumbled. The only kind of moments I even really liked was very early on, and when they first kind of arrived, there was a couple of shots from behind Father Burke, who's the main guy, um, where from behind, because he was wearing a hat, there was kind of a cool like silhouette of him almost as he was walking towards things. Almost like Exorcist slash noir kind of. Like it was a kind of cool image, but that was the
yeah,
extent of the nice imagery. Like it's mostly an ugly dark film that doesn't look that nice.
it yeah, like it always like feels really dark, and I mean I guess you can make the point that it's like it's in the 50s or in like a cathedral, doesn't have like electric lights and everything, but I mean still you can make it look a little better. Like it always kind of had this like annoying like darkish bluish tint to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a layman response to what we just said is it's a horror movie. It's supposed to be dark. But there's good dark. There's the appropriate amount of dark where you get the feeling of darkness without it feeling like because it can go opposite directions. You can have something be pitch black with just the one little thing lit, and that can look really good
Mm.
because it looks shrouded in darkness. Whereas this does the thing where no, you can see everything around the room pretty much. It just looks really dull and
Yeah,
kind of crappy. So when we say it looks dark, we're saying it's the cinematography looks ugly, is what we're saying. It's not lit in a manner which is becoming of a motion picture.
yeah.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the like you're saying that you didn't really like the plot. I would actually say that I like the plot, like, or at least the ideas in it. like the main kind of like idea as to what's going on in this cathedral and why they're there and to stop it and stuff. I was like, oh, this actually is like pretty cool and
I mean,
badass. It's
that
just
that part I'm not so like. I'm not that. I'm not. I don't find that part that problematic. My problem is more
mm,
the backstory and what they have to do in the last act to like
oh sure,
to
yeah.
win, if you will. All that stuff is when I say it's a terrible plot. I'm talking about all that.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Like, um, again, it's a little hard for me because there are um like ideas and everything in here that I like, and again, just this kind of aesthetic, like obviously like the cinematography stuff aside, like just the like the actual kind of like location is all stuff I like because I like that Castlevania like kind of gothic Romanian stone walls, crosses, demonic imagery, like that kind of stuff is my jam. And so like there was times like when I was looking at the movie that I was like, oh, like this stuff is cool, and it's reminded me of other stuff that I liked. It's just yeah, you kind of wish it was better done.
I felt like it never really settled into the place though. Like it never treated
Oh yeah.
the abbey as like a character itself. And what I mean by that is, I never really felt like I learned any of the geography. It just felt like generic like
Oh yeah.
cathedral rooms after generic cathedral rooms. Whereas I feel like in a good movie set in a building like this, where the whole movie's set in the building essentially once they get there, is I feel like I want to learn some of it. Like the hotel and the Shining. Yeah, I can't map the whole thing, but I can say, oh, I know that main lobby. I know where he typed. I know the kitchen area where the freezer was. Like, there's a lot of key locations, and then of course just a lot of hallways that look the same. But there's a lot of things where I recognize where at the end of the film, The Shining, when he's rampaging through with the axe and whatnot, I'm like, oh, I know where this is. And I know where Danny might go and hide. Whereas I'm watching this film and I don't remember any location from one scene to the next. Like, it's just kind of all just
Yeah.
generic, forgettable.
And the locations are just there when it needs to be. It doesn't feel, it just feels like, oh, we need this room now. Okay, here. Like, oh, now we need, this place to unlock this place. It's like, okay, yeah, just throw it in there. And yeah, there are scenes where, someone will be like ran through a hallway and you're kind of like, where is this exactly?
Yeah. It doesn't really. It doesn't really build at an appropriate pace either. I feel like it actually moves too quick. Like like they're there and immediately stuff
Sure.
starts happening, and then it's the next day where they get separated, and then immediately we're sort of diving into what ultimately is going to become the final act. And it's like, give them time to get scared and creeped out by this. Give them time to
Oh,
like. I
yeah.
feel like this should be a slow paced creepy movie. And instead, it's like boom, 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 boom.
Oh.
Don't get bored. Boom, 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 boom. Don't get bored. Please don't get bored.
Well, it kind of feels like they're kind of setting it up as like a mystery movie. Like it's like, okay, why did this nun commit suicide? Why are we here at this place? And but it never feels like it's taking its time and giving you clues and that they're trying
Well,
to figure something out. It's
I
like
think
you kind of know exactly what's going on as soon as you're there.
the biggest problem with what you just said though, Tim, I agree that that's what it feels like it's supposed to be. But the problem is that we know why Dylan committed suicide because the opening scene is why
Oh, sure, yeah.
you get it in the scene why she does it. The opening
Yeah.
scene clearly makes it it displays why she makes this choice. We completely understand what she did and why she did it. The characters don't know, so basing the entire movie around them investigating this is kind of weird. Like, how about
Yeah.
instead of this, you don't show most of the opening scene, you just have friends you find in the body, and then we're like, oh, why is this happening? This is kind of weird. This is really,
Yeah.
a nun hung herself. What? Like, why did she
Yeah.
do that? And like, what led to this? And then the creepy like elements around it. There's a couple of little quirky moments to do with her death, like where her body is, and weeks later there's still kind of blood, which is weird, and so on. But
Yeah.
like, you could do something with it with the mystery, but we know why she did it the entire time.
Yeah.
So there's like 2/3 into the movie when Irene turns to Brooke and goes, "This is why she killed herself because of this." And I'm like, "Yeah, we've known that since the opening scene.
Yeah.
This means nothing to us as the audience. We know this already."
Yeah, and that's kind of like the whole movie. There really isn't any like subtlety at all. Like
No,
there's
yeah.
at one point at one point they're talking to this character and the character is so creepy and instantly in the audience you're like, well that's a ghost. They're talking to a ghost.
No,
But the
hey,
characters are still like
not only that, the voice this person is putting on is the most over the it sounds like the voice you do for the creepy witch in a cartoon, not
Oh
for
yeah, definitely.
like a
Yeah.
proper movie. It's like,
Yeah.
welcome, yes, the sisters are praying, yes. Oh my god, shut up.
But it's like, and again though, none of the characters ever react like, hey, so what's going on? We're talking to a dead person, right? Like they're all just like, can you tell us like what's going on right now? Like it's like, what is going on? Like you should act like real people, like or at the very least, you have the father who's this, investigator of like weird stuff. Like at least maybe having himself an acknowledgement, like, oh, understand that we may be talking to spirits or something. Like
Mhm.
something is just it's just so weird as the audience watching stuff that is so very clear, like not
It's
right, and the characters not accepting it.
especially since in this case the character we're looking at doesn't have a face. Like she's got a veil on, like
Yeah.
a black veil, but like the lighting is so specific, so we can't see a face, right? And all I could feel is like, well, surely if you're standing there, like I get that this is the movie, and you have to give it, it is a movie, you have to give it some leeway, but in this movie, they played all these tricks with the lighting, but the characters who are standing there should see things better than we do. That's just the way, the
Yeah.
way eyesight works. But it's better than what a camera can see. And you light things in a movie so that the camera picks up certain details, and that makes your image, and that's part of the craft. That just makes sense. But here, like they're staring, they're a couple of feet away from this character who's, and yeah, it's dark, but you literally can't make out a face at all. There's no detail behind the veil, and this does not strike either one of them as, hey, maybe that nun we were talking to was maybe not real, or not a
Yeah.
person or something. Something creepy's going on, man.
And like, some people might be like, hey, that's a spoiler, but it's really not, because as soon as you see it in the movie, like, okay,
Yeah.
this is not like a live person.
Yeah, that is immediately obvious. The second she starts speaking, this is a person sitting there. Yeah, and obviously we'll get into it more in spoilers, but there's this weird thing they do with, like, Irene's whole plot is that she's not taking her vows yet. So you kind of assume, like, just movie writing 101, character's not taking her vows yet to become a nun. She's not made that final commitment. She's going to do that by the end of the movie, right? That's going to be how she, either how her story ends, or in this case, it's going to be kind of the commitment before the final big fight, if you will. And that's kind of what I think's funny about it, is that it treats the arc more like an action movie, where she is basically getting to the final act, like, I'm going to take my vows and I'm going to take on this nun bitch. Like, that's basically how it plays in the movie. She doesn't, she speaks a lot more calmly. She's a nun, but but that's essentially the gist of it. And then it plays out like an action scene. In my scripted review, which will go up after this does, I actually said it reminded me of like the Fan Four stick, like the effects, everything that's happened at the end, and it's like saving the world. It's like proper, like crappy Fantastic Four CGI levels of nonsense.
Yeah.
And it was ugly as shit. It was bad. It was haphazard. It was messy. The whole thing's messy,
Mm-hmm.
from direction to story beats. This movie just sucks, Tim. It flat out sucks.
I mean, I think I had more fun with it than you. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say it was a good movie, but I mean, it did entertain me enough. Like, I wasn't angry after I saw it, but I feel like I was more disappointed because I was like, oh man, there's a lot of stuff that I wanted to like.
I think,
It just didn't really pull through for me.
like I say, the big stuff that happened the first, like, spending the night there, that's when I was out and I was like, this sucks. But I wasn't angry yet. It was when we got the flashback exposition where I turned to angry, and I was like, oh god, no, it's one of these. And then it just kept going from there, and I just got angrier
See,
as the movie went on.
See, like that stuff doesn't make me like angry because I like it. It's just like okay, like I like this idea, but it's just like this is such like a big thing. Like this could be its own movie. Like it just feels so shoehorned in. So I don't know. It's more like I don't know.
I don't think it works for a horror movie, because I feel like once you show it this much, it's it's a classic thing. Don't show the shark, right?
Sure, yeah.
Hide the shark. It's creepier. It's even more true when it comes to supernatural things. I think once you start showing the supernatural things out in the open and you explain it too much, You're not a horror movie anymore. I mean, you can do that in like a fantasy where you're in a magical world where everything's magic, and that's just part of the world. That's fine. But for me, the creepiness, the mystery, the dread is just completely gone once I get like the CG, like
Oh sure,
you
yeah.
know, like the big CG opening, and you know, it's one of the things that I don't like. It's funny. It's one of the things I don't like about the Hellboy movies is the all the CG sort of elements with the villains and stuff, which I know you'll defend to the death, Tim. Um, but
I
yeah,
mean, in general, CG isn't the best
yeah,
ever, but
yeah, it's pretty rough here. It's definitely the most CG I've seen in a Blumhouse movie. I'll say that for sure.
yeah. Yeah. Um,
Well, oh, actually,
was this
oh,
Blumhouse? This was New Line.
New Line. Sorry, yeah,
Is it still Blumhouse?
it's not Blumhouse. Sorry, no. It's not Blumhouse. That's my bad.
Yeah,
I said
Halloween
that
Brain.
because Blumhouse is everything. I get the Halloween trailer to me at the theater when I saw this.
Yeah,
Oh
me
baby.
too.
Oh, are you
I was
upset?
well, I was met. Well, I was trying to avoid it because it's like I saw people saying
Oh,
like
I
you
got the
know it's
first
like oh
one.
like
I didn't get the second one. I got the first one.
oh yeah I got the new one. I was like God damn it, like I purposely didn't watch this online because I
Yeah,
didn't
I know.
like I want to try to avoid as much spoilers as possible.
But at least it was really good though, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, the trailer was great. I mean, I'm very excited, but
What? Because you know one of the things that I love about Halloween 4 is the idea that the town is ready for him. So the idea that Laurie is ready for Michael and she's like built like almost Home Alone-esque traps is freaking amazing. I'm into this. Anyway, not to divulge into
very
more interesting things, but on you go. Yes.
I don't know if this was my theater or just the movie in general, but like it seemed like the music was way too loud in this. Like, you know, we're already talking about how it has
Mm,
like, you know, the typical cliche loud music stings, which is annoying, but whatever. You know, we're used to those in horror movies, but like in here, I was like, this is way too loud. I don't know if yeah, it was a particular theater or not, but
No, I agree with that. The mix was kind of off, and I think what's even worse about it is that a lot of the characters have accents, which you know I'm usually
oh
fine
yeah.
with accents, but when you start making it harder to understand, it starts to make it difficult to differentiate. Because other than Irene, everyone's got a thick accent of some kind. French, he's French Canadian, so he's got the accent. Um, I never actually caught where Brooke was from, but it's a really thick European accent. Um,
Yeah, it was. I didn't really like him to be honest in this movie. Like I don't think he's a bad actor, but yeah again he didn't really seem to fit to me because he just had this like very like you know like I'm very serious badass kind of guy, but it's like you know he'd be saying like he talks like that like you know even before like you know shit's going down like just like in general I'm like I don't know I didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, Irene stuff is really thin, but there is kind of an attempt to have an arc. Bjork doesn't really have anything. He has like the one thing that he has as a character is that he's kind of haunted by this exorcism that failed, like in the past, and but it's basically just an excuse to like separate him at some point, so that he sees like glimpses of because the nuns tormenting him with images of his tormented past, like that's like the only reason for it. It doesn't really go into it. He doesn't really have an arc where he achieves like sort of enlightenment or peace because he helps fight the nun or anything like that. There's none of that.
Yeah. And we talk about like before about how yeah like you never really get a sense of you know the place like also there's like weird stuff that's happening in the village as well but like you never see it like you only see like a couple of tiny glimpses of the village and you can tell that something's wrong and people are blaming this cathedral for like other stuff that's going on but again there's no sense of like all right well what exactly is this place what are the people like here how is it affecting them like there's it felt like
Yeah.
there's no world building or anything.
No, there's literally one scene. It was actually really jarring because it just cut to French in a bar and they start talking
Yeah.
about how bad things are. And I'm like, this is weird. This is just one scene. Again, it feels really ham-fisted. Some base level ideas they just threw in there and like didn't even bother redrafting the script, and it was just kind of.
I mean, I have no like I wonder like you know since it is like a shared universe or something I wonder is this something that you know you place a lot of the blame on the director or is this a movie by committee kind of thing because it definitely feels like it has that you know mishmash throwing a lot of ideas
Mm,
out there kind of feel to it so
I mean, speaking.
again
I was gonna say, speaking of the shared universe aspect of it, I think, I mean, this is kind of a good thing in a way because you can just happily ignore them all. But I do think the Annabelle movies and this now especially feel completely inconsequential to the Conjuring movies. Like
Oh, sure,
they do
yeah.
not matter. They do not matter at all. And this is where like we're calling it a shared universe, but honestly, it's not really a shared universe. There's the Conjuring movies, and then there's spin-offs because they're the main thing,
Yeah,
and then the other movies are clearly just these little side stories that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, they're basically just spin-off movies.
Yeah, because
I
at the
mean,
end of this, it's like
it's fun, but
yeah, at the end of this, it's like, well, what was the point of this really? It didn't really add anything to the overall thing. I'll give it some credit. It kind of sidesteps like one of the things that I hate about both Ouija Origin of Evil and Annabelle Creation being prequels. That is, but it still has to do the thing at the end where it's like, oh no, and here's how it connects to the Conjuring because that has to happen.
yeah.
And then ultimately, it's like, well, it didn't really matter then, right? Like we're never going to see these characters again, or whatever. So
And
you know,
the yeah, the problem with the connecting it though is like they have to make it like so clear how it's connected, like to the point where they're like, all right, well, we're just gonna show you the scenes from The Conjuring where it connects because we're not sure if you're getting it. Like,
yeah.
it's like, all right,
Do you know
like
the
you could have just let it be this nice little Easter egg that I would have read some online article about. Oh, did you catch
Yeah.
this? Like,
That's the thing. I feel like I would have respected this film a little bit more had I went and seen. Next time I watch the Conjuring movies and I noticed this, and I've been like, oh, okay,
yeah,
like that was still a shit movie, but that was a nice little way to tie it in. But instead, they actually have to just cut to the scene, and it's just kind of like, oh, okay, you're spelling it out for me, okay. Fine. But even the final little, because obviously it's like there has to be the final little sort of swerve to connect it, right? That final little swerve is so quick and just immediately out of nowhere that it's just like, oh, okay, that's how we're
yeah.
doing it. Okay, fair enough.
And one last thing, I would mention, I won't name the specific movie because I don't think you've seen it yet, but
Oh.
the ending, I was like, oh, well, they're just doing the ending of this movie. That was kind of a ripoff, to me, but
I'm assuming it's a recent movie since you phrased it that way. You've not seen
oh,
it yet, as if it's
well,
something we'll be getting
no,
to soon.
oh no, it's a movie from the '90s, but I'm pretty
Okay,
sure I
all
asked
right.
you about it before, and you said, oh no, I've never seen that.
Oh, fair enough. That case, I won't guess it because I was racking my brains. Oh, what new releases are we waiting for home release on that I've not seen? But okay. So we'll go spoilers. Let's do full spoilers then
Okay.
from here on out. Well, goddamn, I want to start immediately at the because everyone knows I hate the scene in supernatural horror movies in the middle where the character goes to research the thing. And there's a little bit of that in this with Father Burke. They find some books, and there's the name of the demon, and he's like, now, that's not as bad as it normally is because he's not got a library, he's not got a computer. I mean, it's the 50s for a start, but he just
Doesn't do a Google search.
yeah, it's just a little bit of reading. However, the accompanying part of this is Irene's talking to one of the other nuns, which is one of the other big problems I had. Is it felt really weird to me that there was like no peep of anyone, but then once she went through that gate into the the no men allowed part of the convent, that all of a sudden there's all these nuns, which of course turned out to be a twist that almost all of them weren't really there, if not any of them.
Yeah.
They're all just figments of the nuns ghosting or whatever. Right, fine. But she sits and gives her this ridiculous backstory to the convent and how they first trapped the demon. But the problem is that not only do we hear this, we get a flashback as she's saying it, and we see like the Knights of the Crusade rush in, and they stop these evil people from raising the nun, and there's literally a hellmouth, right? Just like the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there's a hellmouth in the basement of this place, and we see the spirit coming through, and it's CG. Even the crack in the circle of the concrete CG. It all looks really bad, and the spirit's coming through. But then the knights burst in, and they kind of stabbing everyone, and then they bring out the blood of Christ, right? Now,
Jesus.
now this is ridiculously over the top, but I can forgive it at this point because at this point it's like, okay, this is still meant to be like thousands and thousands of years ago, right? Well, not thousands and thousands, no more than two, because if we go by Christianity, it's only been about 2,000 or so years. But so they bring in the blood of Christ. The blood of Christ, sealed it and kept it, and that was fine. and we had the convent here to like keep the evil at bay, but it was actually okay for a long time. But then because of the bombings during, I assume, World War Two, that kind of like opened the portal back up. And this is the problem. I feel like as soon as we start talking about literal portals that we can go and look at, I'm like, okay, there's no mystery in this anymore. And I'm like, okay, that sucked. I hated it so much.
Also, it's kind of, they make it sound like they're trying to open this portal back up and unleash hell on Earth, like, which this is way too high of stakes for a Conjuring movie. Like, we're used to people being possessed and like families being haunted. We're not used to potentially opening up hell on Earth. Like, that is like way too much.
We're also, because the stakes in this one are literally we have to save the world. That is the stakes. Like, if we don't stop her, the world's going to be doomed. And this is the other thing. It doesn't really like. This was a much bigger problem than Annabelle, admittedly, where I felt Annabelle wasn't the movie it was supposed to be, because it wasn't really about the creepy doll, right? And that was a big deal, at least for me. This movie, it isn't as guilty of that, but I still felt this weird disconnect where I didn't feel like the nun in this really acted or did what the nun in The Conjuring 2 really did. Like, in The Conjuring 2, so the ending, just to mention this for context, it turns out Frenchie, just before they defeat the nun, or the nun passed on into Frenchie, and Frenchie's possessed, and that's one of the people in the slideshow in the first Conjuring movie, right? And then Conjuring 2, the nun's kind of stalking the Warrens because they exorcised her, and that's kind of why she's sort of stalking them. Which, by the way, still leaves that kind of unfulfilled in terms of like there's probably still more to do with her in like post Conjuring 2, but whatever. But I never really felt like in this one, like she's literally trying to get out and like destroy the world. Like I just never felt like it was the same character or motivation. It felt different, even though she looked the same.
Yeah, I mean, what I got from the other movies is that she wants to like corrupt souls. So, like, why can't it just be like you have this cathedral with like very holy, devout people, and then like a demon that's trying to corrupt them? Like, why do you have like such crazy big stakes?
Yeah, I don't know, but so okay, I accepted the blood of Christ because it was thousands of years ago. Whatever, it's closer to the the crucifixion and so on.
Sounds like you went through a baptism. Accepted the blood of Christ.
But
okay.
Oh, let me finish this point. However, when we get to the final act of the movie, and like we have to stop her somehow, they've got this mysterious key, and then they open it. Because this is the thing. They pick the reason why they sent her here is because she's had visions as a child, so that she's got like a supernatural ability or connection, right? She's kind of a psychic, and she's been getting these visions of Mary will point the way, and the statue points to where the key goes in, and she opens the key, and the rock opens, and what do they find? They find the blood of Christ. They literally have the blood of Christ at the end of this movie, and not only that, when she uses the blood of Christ, she puts it in her mouth and spits it at the nun. She literally has the blood of Christ in her mouth and spits it in the face of the nun. That is how she defeats her at the end of the movie. I'm sorry.
I would argue she spit CGI blood at the nun, but
was it CGI? I didn't even notice that in the scene.
Maybe I'm wrong, but to me it looked very CGI.
I feel like it would be harder to do CGI in this case though, because spitting's. Surely it's like it's close up on her face and like it's coming at like the screen. I don't know. To me, it looked very fake. It may have been. Maybe it was like the slow down effect or something. Yeah, I didn't notice it, but maybe it was just the fact that it was so close up and slowed down. It just looked kind of unnatural. But you might be right. You might have been CG. I just didn't notice it. But I feel like it would just be easier though to just give her some red liquid and say, "Here, spit."
Sure. Yeah.
That just feels easier to me, especially since the shot's not actually like aiming. Like again, because it's coming towards the camera, you don't actually have to cover the other actor with blood. You can just have her spit into the air essentially.
But it's like, how much of this do they have? Like, does the Vatican just have like a bunch of blood lying around? And it's like this. It's this little. It looks kind of like a vial inside of like a bottle or something. Like it doesn't. Like it's not like a big bottle that's filled to the brim. Which when she spits it out, she spits a lot out. It's not like a little trickle or something. It does not feel like there's that much in there.
Yeah, nah, she has tons of it in her mouth. It is. It's hard to swallow, no pun intended. The whole thing it's just silly. And then when the nun's defeated, like, because the where the Hellmouth is, it's all watery right now, and the water starts doing a whirlpool, and again it's CG, and the nun's like sucked
Yeah.
into the middle of the whirlpool, and it's just so over the top and just kind of obnoxiously. It's like they're going for spectacle, but it just looks ugly, and it's like spectacle is the last thing I want in a horror movie. It's the wrong genre.
Oh, definitely.
Spectacles,
Yeah.
action, spectacles, sweeping science fiction, and so on. Not horror.
Like the end of a superhero movie when you have like, the big swirling light in the sky or something.
Hence
Like,
why I compared
yeah,
it to
you
Fantastic
don't
Four.
yeah. Yeah, you don't want that in a horror movie. And especially when you think about like, the horror movies that you like from the, 80s or what have you. You think of these big endings, but it'll be someone chasing someone or, you know, like just like there's always like usually a lot of running, chasing, or fighting one on one or something. But yeah, you don't think of these big, gigantic set pieces and like you know tons of CGI and like stuff like that.
And people
Like
people
I don't
flying
know, it's weird.
around and
Yeah,
getting thrown up against walls and stuff. It's so loud and over the top, and it's like they just don't know how to be either creepy or intense, because it's not intense. I mean, it's boring. I was just bored throughout like the last half of this movie. I was waiting for it to end.
uh, I mean, to be fair, I wouldn't really say I ever got that bored with it. Because I mean, at least there is like stuff going on. Like it's not really handled that well, but I don't know. Like I never really got to that part where I was bored.
There's a point where if you're not invested anymore, like, it just feels like you're going through the motions, and that's kind of how it felt
Oh,
with
sure.
the last
Yeah.
chunk of the movie to me. Super rough. Oh my god, that flashback and then the whole blood of Christ stuff at the end, and then the big CG
Yeah.
whirlpool, all of it just not feeling it.
Yeah, and and like the people I went to the movies with, like, we were talking about it afterwards, and it was kind of just like, all right, so like, is it every time there's like an earthquake or some type of disturbance, is this thing just gonna open back up? Like,
I think at least Romania is not an earthquake prone part of the world.
yeah,
I think they've at least got
hopefully.
that going for them. So that's kind of nice.
I don't. Yeah, and now I so like the part of it I do like I do think it is a cool idea that you have this like twisted whatever he was, like Duke or Marquis or something, that like builds his own church like to worship demons, and then the church like goes in and takes it over and sanctifies it, and then you need a constant rotation of nuns to constantly be praying over it, like to keep the demons at bay. uh
Hmm.
well, I guess that kind of happens later once the Hellmouth like breaks open or whatever. But like that idea in of itself, I think is pretty cool. But like you said, they rush over it so quick, and then they actually show it in a flashback with like like a Catholic knights bursting in, and like yeah, all of that stuff like is just way too much. And then yeah, adding the blood of Christ and everything, it's like I was like looking at it, I'm like, oh, I like this idea, but yeah, you're just going way over the top with it.
Yeah. Because there's a scene when we don't know, and I say we don't know, we knew, but all the nuns are praying, right? Because it's getting so bad that there's every single nun there's praying, and then Irene, like, kneels down in the middle. So, and she's in white because she's not a full nun yet. She's in white, where everyone else is in the traditional black and a little bit of white. And she's kneeling down, and they're all praying. And there's this big moment in the middle of this where the camera's like in a bird's eye view, and all of the nuns around her all get thrown around to the sides of the room like a circle. They all just expand outwards and get thrown away from her, and she's left in the middle. And I'm like, this is just so ridiculous and over the top. And all I could think was, if you want to do a creepy scene where she's praying, she's got her eyes closed. Like, have something creep up behind her. Do something, like, And then when the other characters like finally burst in because Bjork's getting attacked by the zombie of like the nun, the one who killed herself.
Oh, okay, yeah, the one that hung herself.
Yeah, she's like zombified now, and French like shows up to save him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's how he comes back into it. And then they finally come into the main chapel area, and she's like, "Oh, we were praying with the nuns," and she's, "What nuns?" It's like, "They were here," and I'm like, "Ah, movie, you got me. What a great twist. Yes, the nuns weren't really there the whole time. I just, oh dear. And I think the big problem with that as well, again, showing us that opening scene, because the opening scene, which we never really, we kind of mentioned it in spoiler free, but we didn't really, obviously because it was spoilery. But the opening scene is basically what appears to be the two final nuns at the convent trying to like close off the door that's God stops here. That's behind this doors where the hellmouth is, and the older nun gets killed, and she basically says to her, "Hey, like if you this thing, the nun wants to leave in someone's body. You know what you have to do if I don't like put this at bay." And that's why she kills herself, because if she doesn't kill herself, she'll be possessed, and then the nun will get to leave. That's what she doesn't want. And we know that in the opening scene. We get that in the opening scene. But not only do we know that, completely killing all the mystery of what the characters are investigating, we also get the feeling that this is the final two nuns. This is the last stand. So everything, as soon as all these other nuns appeared, I went, this feels weird. This feels unnatural. They're here. This is probably, not real. This is probably a vision or a haunting or whatever. So,
yeah, it's very strange because it's called The Nun, and from what we know of the Conjuring movies, the nun is this demon dressed like a nun, but then there's also a lot of other nuns in it. So it's kind of weird to be like, all right, well, there's these other creepy nuns, but I don't know, are they all possessed by this demon, or all the oh, okay, all the other nuns are ghosts, but like some of them are still acting creepy, and it's like, well, why aren't you just trying to help them at this point?
I tell you what,
we're talking about that, like that one nun in the beginning that they talk to that's like obviously dead. Like, why are you being so cryptic and like trying to turn people away and telling them to leave when like shouldn't? I mean, we see the other ghost nuns are praying and stuff, so we know that the dead nuns can be helpful. So why don't you try to help them at that point and say, hey, here's what's going on?
I would have to assume that the dead nuns praying weren't actually doing anything. That was just all an act.
Okay, but they're not trying to scare people or warn them away.
Oh, sure.
They're still, there, and they're not actively working against
I don't know if the whole thing is just a ruse to like get Irene into the place where she wants her, so she can eventually take her over. Like if it's like just putting her into the fear, because by the time she starts praying, she's very like terrified. So I guess that was kind of the point. But I'll tell you what, Sister Act 3 really took a turn. I was not expecting this out of the film. I'll say that much. I mean, I guess if again, just the one positive I'll give it over Annabelle, outside of the main actress, who I do like, would probably be that at least there is a lot of nuns. There's a lot of nunning happening, as opposed to Annabelle, where the doll was like almost forgotten. It's just like sitting there, and most of the stuff in Annabelle was just a demon doing things. It was like, that's not the movie anyone wanted from this. And don't get me wrong, this is shit, but at least it is a nun movie. I can't dispute that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want creepy nuns, like it definitely will give you that. One scene that like made me laugh is the scene where Father Burke gets tossed in the coffin, and Irene
just
is
for
kind of
context. This was the first night to stay over. This was the big sort of section I was talking about where I lost all hope. So continue.
Yeah. And so, and Irene is like searching the castle's grounds, and because of course, like again, super creepy stuff is going on, but she's just kind of like, oh hey, where's that nun going? I'll go follow her, even though she's being very creepy and not saying anything when I called her. Like, all right, sure, but so she's away from the graveyard, and like Father Burke is trapped in a coffin like 6 feet underground, yelling, and like all of a sudden Irene turns and she goes like, Father Burke? Like she heard him, but it's like there's or I think she hears like the bell ringing and is just instantly like, Father? Like there's no way you would instantly assume.
Yeah, we should explain the bell thing. So they set up early on that all the graves have these little bells attached, and the idea is that during the plague, people were terrified that they'd be buried by accident because they'd appear to be dead and then turn out not to be dead. Yeah. So they could ring a bell.
Which is a true thing. I've heard, stories about that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds believable to me. I mean, it's this kind of a creepy thought, and obviously these days we have enough testing to not worry about it. But
Yeah.
I get that in a simpler time, this was probably a concern, right?
Yeah.
But and I'm like, okay, so that's set up for later. Someone's going to be in a grave later, and they're going to ring the bell. I was expecting that to be much later and be like a big thing in the third act. Instead, it's like 20 minutes later, like the first big scary thing that happens. And even his whole thing, he starts chasing the boy that he failed to exercise, and that's how they trick him. And he ends up in the graveyard, and he just falls in the grave, and then it just appears dirt over the top of him. And I'm like, what? Can the nun just like make more? Like, just make things appear and happen. Like, it's one thing for them to manipulate what's there and around them. It's another thing to actually just make dirt appear, like 6 feet of dirt just appear on top of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's creating matter. Like,
Yeah.
so, I don't know. What's the rules here? What's the rules for what the nun can do? It was kind of unclear. And I love rules, Tim, in horror movies, especially supernatural horror movies. I love the rules.
Yeah.
So I can understand what's going on and have a clear footing of what the parameters are and what the character's chances of winning are. But
I agree. And then of course she's able to dig him out like pretty quickly. Like,
yeah.
And again, it's one of those things where it's like, she digs him out and it's just like, what happened? And it's kind of just like, oh, like don't worry about it. Like, again, like at this point, you dug him out. It's daytime. Both of you should be like, let's get the hell out of here. Like, this is gonna require like, let's bring back that Christian army we saw in the flashback or something. Because
here's another thing. Like, I feel like this movie just goes for this really generic route where it wants to have some characters come in and have some creepy stuff happening. And I feel like there's so many different hooks you could have, like so many different like takes in this where like, okay, let's make it interesting. What if he actually died there, right? And what if the rest of the movie Irene was just completely on her own and it had to do a movie with just her being completely isolated here? And it's like a psychological thing because the ghost is messing with her. That could be interesting. That could be like a different take on it that could make it more unique. You could do a bunch of things that make it more unique. And like I said earlier on, it blunders so many moments. Like the image of a nun hanging out of a cathedral, right? That should be like a big moment in terms of an image, right? That as an image, that should be something that should look disturbingly haunting and like it should have all these qualities to it. And instead, the actual shot of her hanging there with her like half of her face kind of like like bloody and like snapped off. It's just kind of like it just like it doesn't really have any moment to it. And I feel like no, any other movie I can see this wide shot of like it hanging there. And again, pacing is just a big thing. I think. And I don't think this is. I think the Hollow was better than this. Don't get me wrong. I didn't like that movie that much. I thought it was kind of mediocre. But I feel like this has no pacing in its scenes at all. The pacing is atrocious. And
well, I think at least with the the Hallow, like it feels like, yeah, you get a clear sense of what the movie is and what the plot is, and like you don't really have like a lot of questions and stuff afterwards. Like there's like maybe like kind of one ambiguous thing that you wonder about, but it's on purpose. Like this, there's just so much of like, oh wait, why do they do that? And like, oh yeah, like how comes that happened? And it just feels so messy.
yeah, it's a rough time. Is there anything else you want to talk about with the Tim before we?
I really want to know if Frenchie stole that shotgun or if he asked the barkeep if he could have it.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, there's a shotgun. You see it behind the bar, kind of Shaun of the Dead style, and then he just has the shotgun later on. And all I could think was, yeah, what's that going to do? You're fighting a ghost.
Yeah.
It's useless. Amusingly, the one corporeal thing to fight, the zombified thing, he uses a melee weapon. He like hits it with a shovel and says, "No, I'm saving the shotgun for emergencies." And then he never fights anything else that's solid. Everything else is like a ghost or incorporeal.
Yeah. And then again, going back to like the whole like, man, it just feels out of place. Like you have the scenes where the nun is attacking Frenchie, and the nun is like full on conversing at this point, which I feel like we haven't really. I don't know if we've seen that like in the other movies. She's always been like silent, I think, right?
Yeah, don't have her talk. It's
Uh,
just a bad idea.
yeah. But she's like, talking like, like, oh, like, you miserable little Frenchman, and then like, you have Frenchie being like, I'm French Canadian, and it's like, again, like, like, what are these like action lines like where, like, this
That
doesn't belong in this movie.
hell, that's basically his arc. Outside of the fact that he leaves and then he comes back because he's worried about them, right? His entire arc is that early on in the film he says to them, "I'm actually French Canadian, but don't tell anyone." And then at the end he's like, "No, I'm French Canadian." He accepts who he is.
Yeah,
That's it.
like that would that's like something like Wolverine would say in like an X-Men movie or some shit. Like it just feels like so out of place. It's like, what is going on?
Wolverine French Canadian? I thought it was just Canadian.
Not French Canadian, but he's Canadian. But he always has like jokes like that when people call him like a stupid American or something. Actually, I'm Canadian, but I don't know. It's I was disappointed, unfortunately.
Well, with that, Timmy, I think we should rate the film. So, what are you rating The Nun?
Uh, I mean, I'm not. Obviously, it's gonna be low. I'm not gonna go like as low as possible though, because there was still, like some enough imagery stuff and ideas in there that I liked, and again, I wasn't bored throughout it, but yeah, it just feels like such a mess and a lot of wasted opportunities. But I'd still give it a, mm, I guess just a solid 4. It's yeah, it's I don't know. It's a shame.
Yeah, Joe, it's funny. I was actually thinking of my rating as I was watching it, and it was basically ticking down the more it went. Because at the start I was like, oh, this could be good. Then I was like, nah, it's probably just mediocre. And then it got worse, and I was like, I think I'm going to go with a 3. 3 out of 10. I'm not going lower because I've seen more offensively worse. Ultimately, it was one of those. It was like one of those like mainstream movies that's just super, super, super mediocre, but to the point of like being really bad. The direction is particularly quite bad, actually. But yeah.
And it's like, and like again, like I had like a little bit more hope because if the second Annabelle movie was just as bad as the first, then it kind of would have been like, all right, these movies, I guess I know what these movies are, but since like Annabelle Creation was like an actual surprising like uptick in the movies, I was kind of like, oh well, hey, maybe we're on a roll here, but I don't know. I'm assuming they're probably gonna want to do more. So I hope that this was like a outlier if they do.
Well, they threatened us with a Crooked Man movie, which was another Conjuring 2 character, right. So that's coming presumably still. The Nun actually had the highest opening weekend of any Conjuring universe movie, I believe. So there's a good chance we'll get The Nun 2 back in the habit. So we'll see how that goes. I guess that disputes what I said earlier. We will see some of these characters again because both Irene and Brooke survive. But the thought of like wanting a sequel, I'm like, do I want to see these two go and fight another demon or something? And would it even be them? Because it's the Nun again. If anything, the more interesting to do with the Nun would be to actually just make the Nun the main villain from Conjuring 3, right? Because it's personal to the Warrens because she was like kind of stalking them from afar. And maybe that is the Conjuring 3. I don't know, but yeah, but it made a lot of money, so this Conjuring universe is not going anywhere. Like for better or worse, it's sticking around. So we'll see. But yeah, hated the movie, basically. Hated it. It was shite. So, that brings it. Oh, there's a cat. That brings an end to the discussion of The Nun. It is worth mentioning, I will have a short, spoiler-free, scripted review up in the next couple of days. You can check that out as well, and give it a bit of love if you want. But that'll be up, and you can, of course, support us over on patreon.com /MailFuzzTV. I'm just getting it up now as I'm saying it. And you can do that. You can get us on Twitter at Streams Midnight. Of course, we love you checking these places out because you can support us and keep the podcast coming and keep the conversations going. And that's pretty much us. Obviously, we're getting very close to October. And it's worth mentioning, they're not quite live yet. They'll be live in the next couple of days. But the voting, the Patreon voting, because every month our patrons at the $5 tier get to vote in an episode for the following month. They get a choice of 4 films. Usually there's a theme, it'll be all werewolf movies, all zombie movies, whatever it is. And they'll get to vote in which one we do for the following month on an episode. For October, since this is September, voting for October, like last year, we're going bigger, we're going more special, and there's 3 votes. There's 2 for patrons, and there's 1 for everyone. There's 1 that's a public vote. And I will make sure the link to that public vote is in the description for this once it goes up. It's not up at the time this posts, but it will be here in a couple of days, and I'll make sure it's in the rest of the episodes for the month. And you can check out that. I can tell you the 3 votes now. The themes of the 3 votes. One's a franchise starter, which will sort of dictate another franchise that will start soon and work on through the next half year, full year, depending on how long the franchise is. And then the other one's the Universal Monsters vote. You got your, not the Mummy, because we did that already, but you get your Frankenstein, your Dracula, your Invisible Man, your Wolfman, and that'll be a vote. And then the free vote that's open to the public for everyone will be horror anthologies. That'll be the vote. That's that one. So look out for that in the next couple of days, and you can vote in that. And so you get a taste of the voting for everyone, because since it's October, and it's a time to be jolly and chillery and spookery. Because it's fun and scary and Halloween. Yay! New Halloween movie. I'm excited, Tim. So that is us. I have separately pod, and of course, October is also the Octoberthon, in which we do a bunch of extra episodes where we pump out them every other day almost in October, to celebrate the month of Halloween and the shape.
Yeah.
So.
And we're watching a bunch of extra movies and everything. So maybe people can tell us what they're watching. They can tweet at us or comment. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Join the Facebook group. Use usually a big October thread on that.
Yeah. All good advice. So that is us. That has been Screams After Midnight. So thank you very much for watching, guys. We appreciate it loads. Or listening. Like and subscribe. All the usual stuff. Let us know what you thought of the Nun in the comments. But that is us. And of course, we did review Conjuring 1 and 2 and both Annabelle movies last year. So you can find them in the horror playlist. I'll have to start we've got a horror franchise playlist. It's just all the movies that have a lot of sequels. I feel like at this point that the Conjuring universe should probably just be added to that playlist so that all 5 of them are together. But hey, that is us. So thank you once again for watching and listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, guys, and we'll see you next time.